turn your dial. Dapper Don's here to make you smile with a co-host sharp and riff so true. We've got the laughs, the rants, the view. What's going on? Oh, what's the word? Indy's the city where we'll be heard. From Monument Circle to Broad Ripple on. What's going on with Dapper Don? So grab your coffee, Hoosiers, and let's get to it. 'Cause we're in the house!
What's going on? It's Dapper Don, and I'm excited to welcome you all back. And today, we are joined by a co-host. For those of you who know him as the guy who made my entire marketing presence on the internet. That's right, you know him, you love his work, Evan Rolfing, or RosiePanda_art on Instagram. Evan, say hi to the people.
Hello, hello.
All right. Now, to kind of introduce this topic a little bit, I want to say first that with the rise of mental health awareness, there's come many benefits. We're better able to deal with depression, anxiety, attachment issues, PTSD, and many more conditions without resorting to borderline torture or electrocuting somebody in the chode. With these terms that get twisted, like gaslighting, narcissist, and these other terms, they've helped us to identify and properly treat many things, as well as get abuse victims the help they need. So I just want to say, before we get into it, that I'm not anti-therapy or mental health. I am pro-accountability. And the use of these terms that describe serious conditions being turned into a trend, an aesthetic, an Instagram bio, that's what's disgusting to me. So, I'm going to go ahead and pull up a video. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay.
Sure. Indeed.
There we go. I'm in.
Ultimate ick in dating, in friendships, in any kind of relationship really is when people misuse therapy speak to justify their own behavior or to not feel guilty about it. The one that always pops into my head is people will do something so dismissive or shitty and then be like, oh, sorry, it's just a boundary for me. Like, I hate to tell you, but that's actually not what the word boundary means. Like, one example that comes to mind is my friend was dating this guy and he like completely disappeared without a trace, like no social media activity, wasn't texting her, nothing. And she's like, hello, are you dead? And he came back after 2 weeks and was like, sorry, I just needed some alone time. Like, I had to set some boundaries. You weren't setting boundaries, because setting boundaries means using your words to describe what you need and what parameters you want to set. It doesn't mean disappearing without a trace and then saying it's a boundary retroactively. But it always just makes me laugh when people are like, oh, it's a boundary. Like, sorry, I had to disappear and ghost you. I was just setting boundaries. Like, no, setting boundaries requires doing the setting part too, where you actually say what it is that you need. And the other person can decide if that works for them or not, and then make whatever decisions they need to make. But yeah, that is my ick, is the misuse of therapy speak in relationships and friendships and just kind of in general.
The first area where this mental health talk is usually twisted is in areas like attachment styles, neurodivergency, and trauma. Those are the big three that I've found, at least on the internet. So first off, what has been your experience with these with people using attachment styles as excuses, Evan?
Well, I have a little bit of experience with people using different attachment styles, essentially just to, having different attachment styles, and mainly just using mental health as an excuse regarding it. Definitely, especially, probably need to say disorganized, probably most of all.
Oh.
What about you, Don?
Mine has been avoidant. It's always been the ghosting, the withholding affection, the playing games and pretending they're the prize. I maybe have had one disorganized experience, and that was when a girl in high school, she liked me because of a play we were both in. And then all of a sudden she didn't like me, and then she cut the relationship off, but then the next moment she's joking about marrying me and doesn't want me talking to other women, but then the next moment she doesn't like me like that, and I'm the one rushing. So I've experienced that before. Now, I don't think disorganized attachment was very well known when I was in high school. They were just now starting to talk about attachment styles back in that time. So, but yeah, it's mostly been avoidant. People ghosting, withholding affection, playing games, manipulation, and just doing anything. Now, anxious is also something I've experienced. These are people who you have to give them reassurance 24/7. They're constantly monitoring text tones and response times, and there's constant emotional presence, pressure, and clear clinginess. And I'm sure you've experienced that at some point as well.
Oh, more than likely. I may not be remembering it at the moment, but definitely I feel like I've felt some of that in the past. Maybe not all of those signs, but definitely at least one or two.
Right. And then I know you said disorganized. That's the hot and cold with no warning, push and pull, emotional whiplash. Tell me about your experience with a disorganized attachment style.
Well, a lot of it really just came down to kind of that, push and pull back and forth, and just justifying the fact that that's what they were doing with traumas they experienced in the past. It just honestly, it really did kind of lead to just like a roller coaster regarding emotions, and just leading to a lot of situations being confused.
Right.
Just overall, it's like, 1 second things will be perfectly fine, and the very next, all of a sudden, nothing's okay, and it seems like, I've done something wrong when I really didn't do anything.
Right.
uh
And was this
it's
with
just
past partners or has it been with some friends too?
just friends in the past is the biggest one. um and yeah, also a partner in the past. Just overall, it really is just an emotional roller coaster for the person who is kind of the quote unquote receiving end of that.
Right. Because you genuinely don't know where you stand with a person. And it can create such a thing where you're just like, they don't want me, but they don't want me to go to anybody else. And it's just so it creates this it just creates such a dynamic. And people in recent times again have labeled this thing disorganized attachment style. And I'm gonna say this. Whatever your attachment style is, it's not your fault that you have that attachment style. That comes from your caregivers. But it is your responsibility to get proper healing for that attachment style, and not everybody else is to just deal with it just because you identify with it. It's not an aesthetic. It's not something for your Instagram or Hinge bio. It's something you need to get looked at by the white coats. I mean, what do you think about that? Is that going too far?
I mean, I definitely do feel like you have to have some responsibility for recognizing these attachment styles and how they might be affecting those around you. But also keep in mind, there is a pretty big difference when someone is knowingly doing these things versus unknowingly doing these things. Because the hope is, if they're unknowingly doing these things, it can be, pointed out and talked through with them, and they'll be able to then have that understanding and realization and take those steps to try and work on that. But if
Right.
somebody's recognizing that these are things that they're doing, they're affecting other people, and they're still doing it anyways, that's a bigger issue.
Right. And see, I hadn't thought about that aspect of it really, but my thing is that for a long time, a very long time, nobody knew what these things were. Everybody thought it was just normal. But with the way the internet has advanced and these terms have become so widespread, I honestly believe that there's unless you are actively still in an abusive dynamic or still going through the trauma and still getting the help for it, there's very little excuse for you to be the average Joe not knowing these things and doing this stuff to people and not knowing that you're doing this stuff to people. There's very little excuse because I have a disorganized attachment style. But how do I manage it? Simple. you have to reassure yourself, and then you have to kind of remind yourself that if I push this away, I'm not going to want it. I'm not going to want it gone. So it's like, and you have to go to therapy. You have to talk to someone. A lot more people know this stuff now than ever before, and they're just choosing not to. And I've seen so many people like proudly claim avoidant attachment as a way to own anxious people or disorganized people or hell, even secure people. They've proudly claimed these things as a way to own the others, and it's like that's not, being anxious isn't a brag. That's not a brag. That means that you are so disconnected. You have been so thoroughly put off by basic human connection, which is required for our evolution, by the way, that you are behaving in a manner that's unnatural. I mean, what do you think?
I mean, I definitely do agree with you. I mean, I definitely think that these terms have been much more widespread as of late, and I think it is a good thing that we are getting this information out. But you definitely do see a lot of people who are taking these and kind of using them as an excuse, or using them to justify some kind of behavior that they're doing that is affecting people around them. I know another big thing similar to that would be people overusing and abusing the term neurodivergency. Do you have anything to say on that topic?
Oh yeah, yep. That's right. That's right. What we were going to go into next here. So yeah, I do believe that people abuse the term entirely too much. For one, let me explain as a neurodivergent person, let me explain what neurodivergence is. Neurodivergence is when your mind takes different routes to get to the same solution, essentially. It's essentially when where somebody would go down a path, a neurodivergent might go down B or C path. And while it may look longer, more convoluted to a neurotypical, neurodivergent sees the path as just fine, and they get to the same place, even if just a tad bit later. Is that kind of a good way to describe it?
I feel like that's a pretty good way of describing it. Of course, it is a very, very complicated and nuanced topic to be able to describe and thing to describe, but I very much feel like that's a pretty good description for it.
Right. Now, what this may lead to in practice is people being more how you say, blunt. I noticed myself being accidentally insulting a lot of times. People may have a lower tolerance for lack of intelligence when it comes to basic things. People may, depending on what area of the spectrum you're in, you may not understand social cues. You may not understand the concept of empathy or sympathy. It's a wide spectrum where it's not just like it's not just on the lower end you don't need anything, and on the higher end you do. It's more of a circle than it is a line. At least that's the way it was described to me by the research I've done. It's more of a circle than a line.
Yeah.
So where you can be fairly good at social cues, you may suck at motor development. Or where you may be good at motor development and social cues, you may suck at problem solving. Like there's a wide variety of different things. But I'll tell you what it's not. It's not ignoring basic human decency and kindness and excusing it with, well, I'm probably autistic and quirky, lol. It's not showing up late every time you have to be somewhere and then calling it time blindness. It's not self-diagnosed ADHD. It's not purposely misreading social cues and making people uncomfortable and then claiming later that it's because you have Asperger's. And it's not being messy, lacking hygiene on purpose, and then claiming it's because claiming because you have a sensory issue. And if you do have a sensory issue, that's fine, but you still need to shower. If I wanted to live in piles of filth, if I wanted to be surrounded by trash, I'd just buy a ticket to Coachella. I mean, lack of hygiene just isn't excusable. Wash your ass. If I can smell you, I'm getting a restraining order. I mean, so what in your opinion really have you seen people, where have you seen people abuse this?
I'm being honest, I'll say I have thankfully not had to see very many people abuse this, but I do know one person in particular who very much so. They're diagnosed on the spectrum for autism, but the thing is that they will constantly use that as an excuse for this or for that. And the problem really, comes down to a similar thing that we were talking about earlier of there's a difference between, and you brought it up a little bit as well here, somebody doing something unknowingly and knowingly. If you are knowingly doing these things that are causing issues and causing problems like this person had been, they knew that this was causing issues and they recognized that, but they continued to do so. But if you unknowingly do these things, I mean, that's where, hey, I'm going to let you know this is what's happening. But the idea with that is that, okay, you hear that, hey, I'm doing this thing. I'm going to try and take some steps to not necessarily correct that because, that's definitely not the right wording, but, to kind of help that. So that way I'm not causing this. Versus with the person that I've dealt with, very much so it has been they recognize these things because they will say, well, it's because I'm autistic. And it's like, well, that's not an excuse.
No,
the problem is you recognize it, and the act of recognizing it and continuing to do so shows that that's not because you're on the spectrum. You are choosing to continue doing this thing because you're not even attempting to take steps to help that.
And kind of what's an example of this person using that as an excuse, just to kind of illustrate the picture for the people?
Well, for example, they will be extraordinarily and overly rude and blunt in any situation, and they will take that and run with it. Like I'll say something about something that I just generally had a thought about, and they will jump in and be blunt over it and be rude over it. And we've told, the multiple times it's been said, listen, that is just extremely hurtful. All the things that you've said a lot of the time, and they'll just pass it off with, well, I'm autistic and I'm just blunt. It's like, but there's a difference between being blunt and being just rude and hatefully blunt.
Yes, exactly. And, these people have also used neurodivergency to say that they can't change how they act. They can't change, as though somebody who's autistic or on the spectrum of autism or whatever, however you define it, as though somebody who's in that camp can't change, can't better themselves. And I'm not going to say that all the things that come with neurodivergency can be changed, because that is false. You cannot change your brain makeup or the way your brain works. But if you're doing something that's very easily preventable, you can change that. Being rude is not a neurodivergency thing. It's another you're an asshole thing. Being blunt is normal, but if you say shit that would normally get you punched in the face, I wouldn't be surprised when it happens. Neurodivergency is real. Accommodations do need to be made. But having people bend to your will while you're being a tyrant isn't how that works. Am I in the ballpark there?
That's pretty much exactly what I've been saying. I mean, yeah, especially, being rude just because you're being rude, that's not neurodivergency. And being blunt is, but at the same time, you always can take steps to better that. Um, it really is that situation of knowingly versus unknowingly. If you're unknowingly being heavily blunt, I mean, yes, we probably need to mention something to you, but we're not going to be mad over it, or at least I'd hope,
Right.
because you're not doing that on purpose. But that purposeful usage of that, and then just using neurodivergency as an excuse, it honestly just shines a horrible light on everyone who does have neurodivergencies, who is wanting to better themselves.
Oh, yes, absolutely. It does. It makes us look bad. It's in the same way that those people that like to screw with animals make furries look bad. It's literally this exact same scenario. It's the worst of people who claim to be under a certain group, making the actual members of that group look bad, because there are plenty of people who are neurodivergent and you wouldn't really be able to tell unless they said something. And this is, I mean, this is the case all over, right? Neurodivergency is becoming more and more widely diagnosed, to the point where now even people that seemed quote unquote normal before are now coming up neurodivergent. So I'm not saying it's not real and accommodations don't need to be made and that people aren't experiencing this, but I am saying that there's a difference between I can't control how blunt I am because that's just the first thing my brain comes up with, and I'm going to insult you and demean your intelligence and say hurtful shit that would clearly start an argument and then shrug it off like, well, I'm autistic, I can't change that. It's like that's where it's being used as an excuse, and that's where we got to call that out. Now,
Indeed.
How you can tell this is come on now. Neurodivergent people don't just say random hurtful shit. Like, if it's stuff that comes off as blunt, something that would maybe make you pearl clutch but not necessarily hurt you, then that's probably just you're neurodivergent doing the neurodivergent thing. But if it's something that's intentionally hurtful and demeaning and condescending, it's not neurodivergency. That's somebody that needs their ass kicked. But with that being said, my friend, we are halfway through, which means it's time for what I like to call a groove break, and that's when I'll put on music and let people decompress, let people reset, and then we'll come back, wrap up with the last topic or few. And then, yeah. So when we come back, we'll be talking about trauma and trauma responses. You're watching What's Going On with Dapper Don. Stay tuned.
Money, tall, skyscraper lean, wallet obese, call it cuisine, champagne rivers, gold on the wrist, turntable spin that you can't resist, velvet ropes part like Moses in the same, VIP glow, living like supreme, stacks and stilettos, cash confetti rain, lights flash wild, never feel the pain, stilettos, diamonds in the chain, spin the whole world, party through the vein. Drinks with a goddess glare, eyes cut sharp like they own the air, laughter electric, sparklers in the tray, dance floor flames, DJ blaze the day, lip gloss popping shades, midnight black, love in the moment, no strings attached, stacks and stilettos, cash confetti rain, lights flash wild, never feel the pain, stilettos, diamonds in the chain, spin the whole world, party through the vein, dreams where the night don't sleep, baseline heavy, the rhythm runs deep, pockets so fat they bust at the seams, every shot fired ignites new dreams, stacks and stilettos,
And we're back. All right. So, for those of you who are just now tuning in, we just got through talking about how people use their attachment styles and how people use neurodivergency as an excuse for wrongdoing. And we came to the conclusion that while it isn't your responsibility, as far as it happening to you, it is your responsibility to see someone to take the steps to fix it. And nowhere is this area more important than in the next topic we're going to be talking about, trauma and trauma responses. So, I do want to get into the fact that trauma is real. As someone who's experienced it, trauma is real. And trauma-based responses are real. But the overblowing of fragility, getting mad because people use certain words that you don't like, and just in general being like the worst type of nose ring polyamorous SJW motherfucker is not something that heals you. It burdens others. Am I going too far here, Evan?
I very much so feel it definitely depends on the person. I mean, trauma and neurodivergency overall, but especially with trauma, it is definitely a case by case basis.
Yes, definitely is, because it's literally like snowflakes. No two are the same. Nobody goes through the exact same abuse. Nobody goes through the exact same neglect. Nobody goes through the exact same emotional trauma. And that's not even considering the fact that if it happens at different points in a person's life, it can affect their development differently. You know, trauma that happens when somebody is 4 years old affects them differently than when it happens when they're 24. And, you know, there's a lot of variables that go into it. But I don't know. It's just, once again, doing things that hurt people that you know you can stop and that you know you can control, but then excusing it with, oh, I'm traumatized. Oh, it's because this happened. It's because that happened. It's because this person did this to me, because that person did that to me. So this is a justification for these things, right? And I'm sure you've seen this plenty of times in your life, Evan.
I've definitely seen it throughout my life, yeah.
Do you have any specific instances you're comfortable sharing?
Comfortable sharing with, and definitely not off the top of my head, but as we talk, one might pop up that I'd be all right with sharing.
Right. So the way I see trauma is this. You should not be trying to re-traumatize others in the way, as a way to handle your own trauma. For example, if you've been through physical abuse, don't physically abuse others. This is a really bad thing with parents who they've been through physical abuse as children and they didn't get the proper help, so then they end up physically abusing their children. Or emotional abuse. This is bad with parents. This is bad with relationships, just like the last one is. A bunch of people who go through this trauma feel the need to just re-traumatize others rather than getting the help that they need for that trauma. And getting the help isn't easy. It's not. For one thing, every end you run to get help a lot of the time gives you the same answers, the same flat, boring affect, the same people who feel like they don't actually care. And then it, and sometimes it even asks you to explore the same things that you don't want to explore, that you're not ready to explore yet. But that is still no excuse for re-traumatizing others. Trauma, at the end of the day, explains where you started. Abuse, neglect, mistreatment, whatever happened to you, they're not the victim's fault. But you decide where it ends or if it ends you. So what do you think about that, Evan?
I mean, trying to think of the right wording here. I feel like a good, not necessarily, a good similarity or parallel to, especially the topic over, basically, because of your trauma, traumatizing others because of that. A good parallel to that could probably be the, research topic over a lot of kids who were bullied later on, and years later, become a bully themselves to as a way of essentially kind of dealing with that, but it's a very unhealthy way of doing so.
Yes.
Similarly with this, it's while yes, you are in a way dealing with that trauma, but it's not really dealing with it. It's just letting out your pain and frustrations and angers and any kind of emotion really regarding that. And all that that's doing is really just pushing that onto others and just causing now another person to be traumatized in that way.
Yep. And the thing is, it's not just parental trauma. Parental trauma plays a role even in relationship trauma, because how does relationship trauma happen if two people who aren't mismanaged as kids don't get together and that happens? But it can be relationship trauma that causes people to go online and say things like all men are dogs and all women suck, and for men to fall down red pill rabbit holes and things that much. There's trauma there. There's genuine hurt. Any woman who says her man has to make $1 million a year and have 3 apartments by the time he's 20 has been abused by somebody. Or she's been mistreated by somebody, because you don't just come to that take of your own accord. That's something that where you've been mistreated, where you've not been given the dignity that you deserve. And rather than trying to seek out help for that so that you don't carry unrealistic ideas about people, you just go and you influence a bunch of other people who think like you, and then when you're called out on it, you bring up the trauma argument. And and I hate to be callous. I really do. Like, aside from all the jokes and stuff I've told, I really hate to be callous, but people are only really going to tolerate I'm this way because of X, Y, and Z for so long before even the most understanding reach their wits' end. I mean, that's not a controversial take, am I right, Evan?
I mean, no, but again, it's a good situation of knowing to unknowing. This one's a little bit more gray with that though, because I'm this way because of XYZ. You're right. That really does just kind of if you are constantly saying that, but showing signs of not changing or maybe even getting worse, I mean that definitely is going to wear people down. But another thing is to think about, someone who's dealing with trauma. If they do, in fact, have some kind of an outburst that came out of nowhere, but they apologize and say, hey, I've had some traumatic experiences. That's what that was. I'm sorry. I'm working to get better. And you can actually see that progression of getting better, even if it's slow. It's a very big difference, because on the for one person they're just using it as an excuse to push that trauma onto others, while the other person is recognizing how that trauma is affecting them towards other people and trying to take steps to better that. And so it very much does come down to that, but I very much do agree. It is that thing of, I'm this way because of X trauma, I'm this way because of Y trauma. It really does, just after a while, especially if there's no change in that person, even if it's a small change. I mean, if there's just no signs of them trying to improve or work through that, there's just, you can really only do that for so long.
You can. And it's too many instances, right, because I've been in situations like that. Before I, met you guys, I was in a very toxic friend group. And a lot of what they did, like, for instance, they made fun of my mental health struggles. And they excused them showing me little respect, making fun of my mental health struggles, treating me like an object rather than a person. They excused that with their own trauma. And I didn't discount their trauma. I didn't discount what they went through, But in my head, I was like, okay, I understand what you've been through as a person. I understand your trauma. I'm not here to shame you for that. But I also deserve to be treated like a human. I deserve to be treated with some dignity. And if that's something that your trauma is preventing you from doing, if I'm to believe what you really say, if that's something that your trauma is preventing you from doing, then it becomes a situation where either A, you shouldn't be around people get that until you get that under control, or B, you're lying. You're lying and you're using that as an excuse. And
Very much so.
yeah. And it's like these people were extremely toxic, extremely manipulative, and extremely, extremely, extremely conniving to the point where even random strangers got bad vibes from them. And it just doesn't calculate in the mind correctly when you're doing this to people, treating people like they're chess pieces, manipulating, hurting, doing whatever you do to people, and then excusing it with trauma. And then I'll tell you another thing, because this is not the only person I've met. That previous friend group is not the only time I've dealt with somebody who's had trauma as an excuse for their behavior. Had a crush on this extremely avoidant girl when I was younger. And during that time, I constantly had to beg her. She liked me too, which is the crazy part. She actually liked me too, but she kept making me have to beg for her attention, have to beg for her validation, have to beg for even a conversation. And if I didn't reach out and initiate contact, she didn't. And, I, at a certain point, kind of wanted to know why that was. And she brought up all this stuff and then said, so that's why I'm like this. And at the time, I felt, the sympathy and things of that nature. Because when somebody's confiding in you, that's what you feel. But she kept treating me like that. She kept treating me like crap, kept treating me like a dog, like I'm less than. And so eventually I came to the conclusion that no matter what she's been through, she's choosing to remain in this state. She's choosing to continue treating people like this. Because I believe that at some point in our lives, even if it's not now, we are given the tools to manage a lot of the things that go on in our heads. I believe that we are given the tools to manage a lot of the things that are quote unquote wrong with us at some point in our lives. And it's up to us at what point we want to take it. But if you're continually choosing not to take it, that's a choice that you're making. And I mean, Evan, like in your own life, have you found that you've been given the tools to be able to adapt and to self-regulate?
Well, yeah, I mean, very much. I very much agree. I feel like, at some point in anyone's life, really, those tools will appear, and the way that they appear, what those tools are, and the way that they work is going to be different for everybody. But I think the fact that you were emphasizing choose so much is very, very important, because we can give someone all the tools that they need to be able to work through things. But if they choose not to pick them up and put in the effort to use them, that really just becomes a thing where, I mean, using a saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. You can give someone all the tools that they need, but if they choose not to use them, that's their choice, and we can't force that.
Exactly. And like even in my own life, right? I'm not going to say I'm exempt to this, because right around 2023, if you knew me around then, you would see somebody who, yes, went through a lot, but who blamed his trauma for the rash decision making and freakouts he would constantly have, and the blowing up and the paranoia, and just constantly blamed other people and blamed other circumstances for something I was choosing to do. And mind you, At that point, I had been to no less than hundreds of counselors, hundreds of therapists, hundreds of mental health programs. Literally, you name a treatment center, and if I've not been to it, I've at least heard of it because it's been recommended to me, and I still wouldn't change. And it was because, and I started realizing this going into 24, I was choosing not to change because, and it was because I was hearing arguments that I didn't want to hear. True. But sometimes the stuff you don't want to hear is the way you have to go. And I eventually had to realize that nobody was coming to save me from this. Nobody was going to come and hold me and say that nothing that I do is my fault and tell me that you know, I can still continue this way. So I eventually had to realize that and make different choices, associate with different people, act different, and restore what I lost of my own accord. Now, that's not to say that you can't have help in that, but you have to be self-motivated to even do that in the first place. Nobody can lift that for you. It's literally impossible. So,
Yes, and with that, I mean, yeah, it's impossible for someone else to lift that load for you, but also remember that other people can help you. Very much so. I know a lot of people find that having people around them to be able to confide in, talk with, and help them work through that. So don't think that necessarily healing from anything like trauma or working through anything like that has to be done alone.
exactly. Exactly. So, I guess if you're going to take away anything from this episode, it's this. You're not responsible for what happens to you. You're responsible for how you react to it. I mean, you hear it all the time. It's the most cliche saying in the book, but it's literally something that oftentimes the most repeated arguments are because of how right they are. It may not be your fault that you're traumatized. It may not be your fault that you have some neurodivergent tendencies. It may not be your fault that you have a non-secure attachment style. But what does become your fault is how you choose to treat other people based on that, and whether or not you choose the resources necessary to solve that. Because if you can't self-regulate at all, that's you choosing not to be able to self-regulate. And at the end of the day, if you choose not to self-regulate, other people have a right to choose not to associate with you. And they have a right to choose to even call you out on that behavior if it becomes severe enough. So, any final thoughts before I go into my conclusion spiel, Evan?
Well, yeah, I very much so agree. In fact, I actually just realized I think I have a pretty nice story that kind of talks through everything that we've talked through today. That actually is happened between us about a month ago.
Yes.
It was about end of November, beginning of December.
Oh,
And
yes.
yes, we as our friend group as a whole were planning on all hanging out one evening, but a mixture of tiredness and schedules and events just kind of led to that not ending up happening. And so Don here, who was planning on coming over that evening, I had to let them know that it wasn't going to be able to work out. But because of some of my own neurodivergencies and such, I definitely went about it in a very, very blunt way that made it feel as though I was kind of pushing them away and not necessarily wanting them around. And with that, I mean, I recognize that now, especially because, we kind of had a bit of a splitting up, but you were able to kind of, have a conversation with us and talk with us over, hey, this is what that situation was, and we're wanting to take steps to improve that because of X, Y, and Z. But it wasn't we blame it on this. It's we recognize it's this, and we
Right.
want to better that. In fact, we didn't even realize it was an unknowing
Yes.
situation regarding that.
Yes.
And
Exactly. And in that situation, right? My thinking in that situation was this is their way of waving me off, right? Because of what I've been through. I told you I have an overactive thing in my head. But
Exactly.
that's purely my responsibility to regulate that. And again, I do apologize for not regulating that as well as I could have. We're human, we slip, it's gonna happen. But
Exactly.
what what ends up happening is you have to take responsibility for that. You put that on your shoulders. It is not your job to manage my emotions. It's my job to.
Exactly.
And I definitely could have handled that a lot better, but I'm glad that we came together and had a conversation and kind of understood that, sometimes I'm just going to need to know that there's life. Sometimes I'm just going to need to know that there's life on Mars. Otherwise, otherwise it's going to be a little harder for me to regulate. So we resolved to communicate better. But that's what you do.
Exactly.
I didn't just say, well, I have trauma and you people activated it, so now it's your fault. I said, I have an overactive thing in my head, so I would appreciate it if we could all just communicate a little better, and I will try to work on it. That is at the root of what we're talking about today. It's like, you're not at fault for what happens to you. You're not at fault for your trauma responses, but you are at fault for what you do in the aftermath. But that's all for today's show. If you like this episode, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me and Evan everywhere using the link in the description. I will link his profile in the description as always as well. And be sure to come back right here next Saturday at 6:30 p.m. for an all-new What's Going On with Dapper Don. You don't want to miss what I have in store. Peace out!